There can be no reasoning, no negotiation with this brand of evil. The only language understood by killers like this is the language of force. So the United States of America will work with a broad coalition to dismantle this network of death. I have made it clear that America will not base our entire foreign policy on reacting to terrorism. Instead, we've waged a focused campaign against Al-Qaeda and its associated forces. At the same time, we have reaffirmed again and again that the United States is not and never will be at war with Islam.
President Obama at the United Nations today, another round of strikes, airstrikes in Syria, these targeting modular oil refineries, although CENTCOM saying that they didn't destroy those. They're just taking some of the area around them out of the hands of ISIS so that they can't sell oil for their profit, about $2 million a day. Let's bring in our panel, syndicated columnist George Will, Mara Elias, national political correspondent of National Public Radio, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Okay, George, let's talk about this speech at the United Nations. Thoughts?
Well, it was a pastiche of his golden oldies in one sense. First of all, there's the usual progressive invocation of history, which is a proper noun to progressives, and the fact that everyone better get on board on the right side of history. That is, he knows the right side of history, and history's going to work out, which makes you wonder what all the urgency's about if history's going to work out the right way anyway. Then, something that I'd love to hear how Putin responds to this. While small gains can be won at the barrel of a gun, they will ultimately be turned back if enough voices support the freedom of nations. So it's voices against guns, and I'm betting on the guns, and I'll bet Putin is also. Then he lectures the Israelis on their need to understand the hard work of peace. This is a country that hasn't known an hour of peace in 66 years. And then he seems to have a metabolic urge to remind us and the rest of the world of something that no one doubts, which is that America has flaws. He says Islamic State decapitates and crucifies and murders husbands and sells their wives, but we had Ferguson, Missouri.
How about that? Let's listen to that soundbite about Ferguson.
In a summer marked by instability in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, I know the world also took notice of the small American city of Ferguson, Missouri, where a young man was killed and a community was divided. So yes, we have our own racial and ethnic tensions.
Mara, the White House came back to the press pool and said they wanted to clarify that he was just pointing out America is not perfect. That doesn't usually happen when they come back to the press pool.
No, I don't think he was making a moral equivalence between ISIS and Ferguson. However, it sounds like they understood this could have been prone to misinterpretation. I think that when he's being pretty tough on the world, I took away some other things out of this speech. Tough on Saudi Arabia, saying, look, you know, you fostered this ideology, you have to stop that. And, you know, you're in the global economy, you know, you make a lot of money from it. Can't fund these extremist fundamentalist preachers who give rise to ISIS. But the president always, when he speaks to an international audience, is self-critical because, you know, I think that's the way he thinks he can appeal to that audience.
Being humble in front of world leaders. There may be some world leaders, I don't know, who didn't know what Ferguson, Missouri was, maybe not, but...
Well, it surely wasn't taken out of context, and he intended a moral equivalence. I'll read you what he said. In a summer marked by instability in the Middle East and in Eastern Europe, I know the world also took notice of Ferguson. That is, you know, as George said, we have people who slit throats on television, take their heads off in some places. We have countries that invade their neighbors. More people, incidentally, have been killed in eastern Ukraine than died in the Gaza war. No one knows that. A lot of death. But on the other hand, we have a shooting in Missouri still unresolved. Nobody's been charged yet. And thus, everybody ought to know. This is a continuation of the apology tour or the confession tour, which took place. At least the one thing you can say about the improvement in Obama's treatment of his own country is that 6 years ago he went around the world talking about our sins, and here at least he stayed home and did it from the podium of the United Nations. The other thing that was unremarked about this speech was this is the weakest statement ever issued on Iran and nukes. We no longer hear Iran cannot possess nukes. We're not going to allow this, will not happen. He says we're in negotiations. Iran has an opportunity to rejoin the community of nations. This can only happen if Iran takes this historic opportunity. In other words, Iran will decide if it wants to go nuclear. No threats. Forget about saying everything's on the table. He doesn't even talk about sanctions, which are collapsing. This week, a Chinese ship docked in an Iranian port so they could have joint naval exercises, and they are still talking about how Iran is so isolated. This is a surrender on Iran as our negotiations are reaching a deadline within a month.